It's time for Show Me the Franchise.
With Thomas and Frederick. With Thomas and Frederick.
It's time for Show Me the Franchise.
With Thomas and Frederick. With Thomas and Frederick.
Welcome to Show Me the Franchise, the podcast that talks about franchise of all shapes, sizes, backgrounds, genres, and types. I'm one of your hosts, Tom Stadler, here on this journey through the galaxy with my fellow companion, the ruler of the universe for the galaxy, Fred Dakin.
I just realized I was going to have the best bit and pull out a towel out of my pocket, and I left it at home.
You never
leave a towel at home. God, you know, South Park and Hitchhiker's Guide have that in common, is they really emphasize on be sure to bring your towel.
That's true. It's the most important aspect of any journey. And oh my God, we're talking about a very zany series, arguably and I hesitate to call it the second best sci-fi property out of the UK. Maybe
our guest is about to get up and walk out if you keep saying shit like that.
Well, okay. Now, the only reason I'm saying that, and I'll introduce our guest in a second, is Doctor Who exists. And I'm kind of like, that's sort of like, listen, if America has Star Trek and Star Wars, I kind of feel like Doctor Who is their Star Wars, but this topic's more their Star Trek.
And where's Red Dwarf on the UK sliding scale?
I'm making bold claims out the gate here. I'm going to upset our guest. Let's just get him introduced. Our guest this week is Milwaukee comedian Aaron Kohlbeck. Welcome to the show, Aaron.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great.
You had a reaction to that.
Well, it's interesting you bring up Doctor Who because there are between Doctor Who and Hitchhiker's Guide, right? Mm-hmm. Which is what we're talking about.
Yes. Oh, yes. We are talking about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I almost was like,
well, people are thinking it's either South Park or Hitchhiker's Guide. I gave the two things.
There's, Douglas Adams was the writer on Doctor Who, wrote a couple of episodes.
Oh, yeah.
There was ideas for a movie that he wrote that didn't get made that turned into the third book. So it's like, comparing them and saying, one's better than the other. Well, I mean, it's hard to say, but, they're part and parcel of the same thing, I think, in some respects.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think if I recall from some of the research I was doing that there were aspects of like one that kind of informed the other, too, a little bit, right?
Yeah, so he had written the movie Doctor Who and the Cricket Men, which didn't get adapted, kind of got lost, but he took the ideas and turned them into the third book.
That's Life, the Universe, and Everything.
Yes, Life, the Universe, and Everything. And then, but there were some other ideas which there was a lost episode that he had partially written that he took some of those ideas and incorporated into different parts of the series as well, too. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, so...
You said a lost episode, and I know you meant a lost episode of Doctor Who. But for a second,
yes.
For a second, I got excited that he wrote an episode of Lost. I was like, he's responsible for the smoke monster.
Yeah. No, sorry. Yeah, that's Lost episode.
You would know much more about Lost if he wrote episodes of Lost, because I feel like if it was the smoke monster, it'd be the smoke monster comes from this, and it's this and that, versus.
Yeah. Gosh, I'm excited to talk about this topic today with you, Aaron. I'm glad that you picked this one. I mentioned that to you before we started recording because I think Hitchhiker's Guide, we were kind of litigating this a little bit now, and I'm glad we get to do this on mic, is you kind of said it was niche, and I'm almost like, but I feel like you always at least hear a reference to it growing up or something like that. It sort of falls in the back of like, not like Red Dwarf. Really, Red Dwarf is like you are deep cut in some like British properties there, right?
Right.
But I don't know. I'm like, I think Hitchhiker's Guide might be bigger than we give it credit for.
And, part of it might be just my perspective because for a long, long time, I was really deep into the Hitchhiker's fandom.
Yeah.
And so maybe my perspective was skewed because I knew people who knew so much of the minutia around the series and Douglas Adams' life that, when someone was like, hey, 42, and then they didn't know anything else, I was like, nah, you don't really know anything. And so not people know anything. And so that might be, kind of why I was thinking that. But
I mean, it has been floating out there, I think, without any new installments for at least a little while now, right?
Right.
So we're definitely in like it's like that old thing that you might know about. But I guess tell us a little bit about what brought you to Hitchhiker's Guide in the first place.
sure. And I'll try to keep it brief because I could talk about this for days.
This is the juice, though, Aaron. Let it fly.
So, as a kid, I got introduced to sci-fi young, right? Probably third, fourth grade. And my introduction was Ray Bradbury. And I can remember he had a short story called The Sound of Silence, which is about time travel and all this other sorts of stuff. It's a great story. Go check it out. Very haunting sort of thing. And the school I was at actually, and the library had like film strips you could check out with an audio cassette and just watch it in the library. And I did that. And so I was in that library all the time. And one day in 6th grade, I was walking through the library to check some stuff out. And there was a book that the librarian had set out like on the display. And it was The Restaurant at the End of the Universe. It wasn't even Hitchhiker's Guide.
No.
And I was like, oh, that looks interesting, right? Because I want to explore more sci-fi. I want to do all this stuff. And I picked it up and I read it and I loved it. And I probably checked it out 3-4 more times that year from the library.
Wow.
Without realizing that I was reading the second part of the story. I was just like, hey, there's some stuff that I probably didn't know what happened. That's all right. It's
Like jumping into Empire Strikes Back without seeing any hope.
right. And so imagine my surprise when like 2 years later, I figured out there was a book before that. And I was like, what the heck? Let me find this book and read that. And then there was a third one. It was a small town school library, right? So they only had the one book, which is why it took that long to figure it out. And so then I read all the books. When I got to college, I happened to be in a record store and saw some cassette tapes of, it said it was The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And I thought it was audiobooks. And I was doing a lot of driving between school and home. So it was like a 2.5-hour drive one way for me at the time. And so I'm like, well, this will give me something to read because I was listening to a lot of audiobooks because they take a long time. And I picked it up and it was cheap. It was like $5 and it ended up being not the audiobooks, it was the radio show. And I threw it in and I'm like, okay, this is great. And then all of a sudden you're about not even halfway in and things start to change. They're different than what are in the books. And you're like, what is even going on here? And then I figured out, oh, it's the radio show, which actually came out first.
Yeah.
And I got on a Douglas Adams mailing list with a bunch of other nerds from all over the country and the UK and stuff like that. I got into Usenet groups, if I'm really dating myself there when I talk about Usenet. But it was the same thing. It was people from all over, and we just would get on and talk about Douglas Adams. And probably the best thing, though, was that one day I was walking through campus, and it was right after Mostly Harmless. The 5th book was released. And I was walking by the university bookstore, and there was a sign that said Douglas Adams signing today.
Oh, wow.
I hadn't heard anything about it at all. And I was just like, well, I don't care what's going on the rest of my day. I'm going in there. And got my book signed, including my first edition of Mostly Harmless, which I picked up that day.
Yeah.
I stood in line, got up there, and he was like, hi. Well, he didn't say it like that. I don't know. My voice went like that. He was like, hey, how's it going? I was like, because I'm not as suave as I like to think I am. And but I've got books signed and everything, which was really cool. So,
Man.
and last year I happened to find myself in England, went to Highgate Cemetery, and got to go visit his grave.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you actually got to meet the Douglas Adams.
Yeah.
Pretty
Yes,
cool.
It was very cool.
Man. So and not to at all put a timestamp on
No,
it,
no.
but yeah, that last book, or the 5th book, his last book,
Yes.
was 1992, which is crazy to think it's been over 30 years.
Right.
Wow.
Man. And I'll just kind of rattle off all the titles so that we kind of know what we're talking about today. Is we have, first one is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Second one is Restaurant at the End of the Universe. Third one is Life, the Universe, and Everything. Fourth one is So Long and Thanks for All the Fish. Fourth one is Mostly Harmless, as you just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And then the sixth one, which I'm very curious to hear your take, since it was not written by Douglas Adams,
Mm-hmm.
and that's and another thing.
Yep.
It came out, yeah, like now
It's 2000
15 years ago, 16.
Yeah, like 2008, 2009,
Yeah,
I want to say.
2009 is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's a pretty long sprawling series to start in 1979 and go to 2009.
Mhm.
So but I guess it's like, yeah, like you count that though. Of like, I'd be curious to hear, yeah, what you think about all that. But we can get into that. I'm also very curious to hear what the differences are between the radio play and the book and why he made those changes.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's a pretty incredible journey.
Yeah, I try to be as brief as possible. I don't know how well I succeeded.
We'll dig into the nuances though as we get along here. Fred, what about you though? What are some of your experiences with Hitchhiker?
For me, it was being it was high school at that time, but early high school. And I had, I was talking to all the different cliques, I could go from one to the other. And I had a few friends that were very like nerdy into science, and they would always kind of just talk about Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And I remember talking to like either my mom or grandmother about it and getting the first book on audio cassette at some point.
Oh, wow.
I didn't read it in full. I had like the audiobooks, and something that I used to do when I was little, mostly with the Harry Potter cassettes, where like before bed, I would put a cassette in, press play, and that's what I would fall asleep to.
Yeah.
And
Fred, I'm going to let you finish. I just want to, for the young listeners out there,
Kanye West over here.
cassette tapes were these like actual like physical tapes that you would have to put into a radio or a boombox or a car radio system in order to listen to music or stories.
And then sometimes when you would drift off to a nice audiobook, you'd wake up to the loud like snap of it ending when you've just been lulled into sleep. That was always the worst.
Oh, the little big click, right? Of like,
Or if I picked the wrong side of like a Harry Potter cassette tape and there was scary stuff in that, I'm like, I don't want to hear about the Dementors right now. But I listened to it like probably on car rides the first time, got the story, and then that kind of was in the rotation of something that I love to fall asleep to, because it's kind of, the reading of it is very soothing. I think Stephen Fry is the one who does it.
oh, wow.
So yeah, he's pretty good at doing audiobooks. And then when the movie came out, I feel like I know a lot of people who are like kind of bigger fans were kind of iffy on the movie, since I wasn't like super into it, but I had read the book. I really enjoyed the movie just because of the people in it. I kind of I think because it had like Alan Rickman, it had Sam Rockwell. These are people I like. Zoe Deschanel, who I saw in Elf. I think it was all around that time.
Yeah.
So and it also made me feel like, oh, this is kind of like smart. This is cheeky, because I think it's kind of like a slightly highbrow humor to it, even though there is like some goofy, outlandish stuff in it.
Right.
That's all my knowledge of it. I went back to it last night and listened to at least half the book we were just saying before you got here. It's like a 5-hour audiobook. I think I listened to the first half, and hey, wouldn't you know, I fell right asleep halfway through, in a good way, though. I was getting drifted off, but that's my history with it.
Just like being a young kid again.
Yeah. What about you?
I mean, for me, I'm much of a late bloomer into Hitchhiker's Guide, because like you, I think became more aware of it and more sucked into it because of the movie when that came out. So it was high school for me, and near the end of high school, and I had friends who were big Hitchhiker's Guide fans, and they were like, oh my God, I can't believe they're making this movie. This is gonna be the first of like all these big different ones, which spoiler alert, it's the only one. And I remember going in pretty much blind outside of just some stray references. I knew about like 42, it was the answer to life, the universe, and everything. And I was like, okay, I kind of have some straight ideas. And then I watched the movie and I was very confused, but I was still like, I'm willing to give another installment a chance. But everyone's like, oh my God, you'll never believe they go to the restaurant at the end of the universe next. And I'm like, well, that's a fun idea. And that always intrigued me. I was like, because I was at the end of the first story, it is just sort of like, well, okay, they're at the end of this. What next? And then I'm like, that is interesting. What next? Because it's just so silly, and I'm a very silly person. You guys, I performed with both of you before. I like silliness, and that's why I like Hitchhiker's Guide. And so finally, years later, I think I was living out on my own, and finally it was like, I'm gonna go to the library and pick up the book. So picked up the first one, and I was like, okay, I think I really like this now. Read The Restaurant at the End of the Universe, and I was like, okay, this is interesting. I'm looking for the question, and then I remember reading the end of the third one, and I don't know, I just for some reason I fell off there for a bit. I meant to always go back, and I just still haven't. So, but I want to kind of rediscover again that enjoyment, so I can finally go and finish the series here today. So, it definitely is something that I do feel like you kind of have your moments. It's like a lot of IPs is the way I look at it. Is like when you stumble on it and you like figure out these little nuances, you start to recognize the references like in other things. Like I do feel like it was maybe like Tiny Toon Adventures or something like that, where they would reference like Hitchhiker's Guide and they would do some kind of riff on it. But I can't remember like what exactly that was. It just I think would come, and that's like how I've learned about They Might Be Giants. So that show kind of rips. But it is just I don't know. It's one of those things that it's I think once you get into like British like shows or British properties, it's sort of like that what am I trying to say? That like domino effect maybe is the word.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like you start with like maybe something more accessible, like I was gonna say like I don't know, Doctor Who is maybe like an in, and then you fall into like you were talking about Red Dwarf and the Hitchhiker's Guide, and then it can go all the way down to like the IT Crowd or something like that.
Garth Marenghi's Dark Place.
Now that's that's for the people in the know. Have you ever watched Garth Marenghi?
I have not, but I was thinking, the Mighty Boosh is another.
Oh
one.
yeah,
Yeah,
Mighty
that's
Boosh.
For sure.
Very similar vein as
Yeah.
Garth Marenghi.
Oh, and then you're forgetting the granddaddy of them all, right? Monty Python.
Monty Python.
yes.
I think
Yes.
that's probably the first,
That's
right?
the in, right?
Which also has the Douglas Adams connection.
Oh,
There are only two people that are credited writers outside of the Monty Python troupe for the TV show, and Douglas Adams is one of them.
really?
Yes, he helped write 2 sketches and appeared on the show twice. And worked with Graham Chapman outside of Monty Python on some stuff as well too. That all happened before he wrote the books, but that was
Wow.
yeah. So it was all when he was at college. He was part of Footlights, which was this big comedy review at his university, and that was kind of how he got in there. And then had those Monty Python connections.
No kidding.
And then had a little trouble finding some writing work,
Mm-hmm.
and became a bodyguard and did some like clean chicken coops. It was really weird. And then pitched the idea for the Hitchhiker's Guide, and then started working on Doctor Who. But it's really interesting when I think about it, because it was like at the time, until he started doing Doctor Who and all this stuff, and writing the Hitchhiker's Guide, he thought he was a failure.
Mm.
And I'm like, so it's like, that always makes me feel a little bit better about when I am not hitting where I need to be, right? Because it's like, here's this guy that wrote this stuff that impacted so many people, whether it's the Hitchhiker's Guide or Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, or even the Monty Python Doctor Who stuff.
Yeah.
And at one time was like, I'm a failure, right? So it's an interesting sort of story. Like,
Well,
sure.
it puts perspective on things, right? When it's almost like an artist at their time when they're like, oh, they're making great art, but they don't realize it because they're not getting the response that
Mhm.
I don't know. I always think like Picasso, right? Or not Picasso, Van Gogh. Like that's like the
Edgar Allan Poe.
true him as well.
Mhm.
I just got to shout out my Baltimore homies.
What is an episode or art without Poe? I mean, and what an inspiration. And I think that's something that, and I'm glad you kind of started bringing up the history of Douglas Adams so we can kind of dive into,
Mhm.
how this even came to be. Because when you said he did start writing the radio sitcom, right?
Yep.
And now that you've mentioned that Monty Python was something he wrote for, that adds a whole new layer of context for this entire series. And I'm like, of course, because Monty Python is also extremely silly.
Very much so, yeah. And so it wasn't a lot. It was 2 sketches out of the whole thing, but still, he had that. it was good enough that it fit right in with everything else that was
Right.
going on, which I think can tell you a little bit about the humor that you find in the series.
If you had told me that Monty Python decided to take on like Hitchhiker's Guide as like a type of like Holy Grail type movie, would you guys be at all shocked?
No.
Nope.
Right. I mean, it does kind of feel like it falls outside of their scope a little bit because they are more into like the religious politics and stuff or myth like making and all that. But it's still, I feel like you could have easily cast them all as all these characters.
Yeah, I was wondering, do any of them like do any voices or read for the radio show?
There is no one from Monty Python. on the radio show.
I would have just thought like that would have been a slam dunk.
There was, though, apparently, when they were casting.
Is it the giant foot?
It's not the giant foot, Fred. One interesting thing I did find was when they were like revisiting, I think, the radio series to do the LP recording. They were looking for the narrator, and they had considered Michael Palin as one before they landed on. His name was Peter Jones, who ended up doing it. But yeah, I was like, so obviously they had some of that connection already, but still, that would have been kind of interesting.
Picked up a factoid I didn't know. Great. Now it's going in the filing system. Great.
There you go.
But now I think we're kind of seeing the connecting wires here. Because yeah, so the radio sitcom that he eventually came to write was broadcast on 2 series on BBC Radio 4 between 1978 and 1980. I do love that, like BBC, like Channel 4 and everything over there is like, it's because the UK is like the size of a state that it just has like those, like, it's like a Milwaukee local radio stations or whatever. Like, it's like WTMJ 620, you know, it's like, I'm just imagining, or it almost reminds me of like WGN. That's almost what it makes me think, like Chicago, you know, like land radio. And
Well, like their TV is like built into their like system that it needs to be actually funded, which is nice.
But the original first radio series came from a proposal that you mentioned here, Aaron. It's called The Ends of the Earth. It was 6 self-contained episodes, all ending with the Earth being destroyed in a different way. I'm sorry. So, you know, we were talking about Doctor Who kind of inspiring, but that came later.
Yeah, that came later. Yeah, I was trying to figure out, like, it was like he had the radio show going on, but then also some Doctor Who stuff going on kind of around the same time. Yeah, so it's like he had the Monty Python stuff, and then stuff kind of stopped, and then it seems like a lot of stuff all happened all at once.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting because he was terrible at writing for a deadline. He's got a famous quote that says, "I love deadlines. I love the sound they make as they go whooshing by." And the thing about the radio show is it's famous because there were episodes that they finished hours before they aired.
Oh, come on.
Yes.
Kind of similar to South Park.
Yes.
So
Brett's finding all the ties back there.
and the first book kind of ends like abruptly if you read it, right? It feels like it's like, yep, we're going to the restaurant, boom, the end, right? And that was because he was writing it and missed deadline and deadline and deadline. And finally the book publisher showed up and said, "Give us what you got." And he said, "Here you go." And that was it. Right. And, and so even though it was based on a lot of stuff he had written with the first series, that was why the book just kind of ended the way it did.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Which it's very like on tone for the book though itself. So he had these 6 self-contained episodes though at the beginning. So all ended with the Earth being destroyed a different way. But while writing the first episode, he realized that he needed someone on the planet who was an alien to provide some context for all of that, and that this alien needed to be needed a reason to be there. So he finally settled on making the alien a roving researcher for a wholly remarkable book. I'm reading this from other sources. I wouldn't choose this language sometimes. Named The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. As the first radio episodes writing progressed, the guide became the center of his story, and he basically just decided to focus the entire series on it, with the destruction of the Earth being the only like holdover element from this original run. So that first radio series that we're talking about of 6 episodes, called Fits after the name of sections of Lewis Carroll's nonsense poem, The Hunting of the Snark. Do you have any idea what this is?
You know what? I just knew that they were called Fits, and I didn't know why. until very recently. So, yeah, that's Hunting of the Snark is like, I think, in one of the Alice in Wonderland books.
Yeah, I think they worked that into the second Tim Burton movie
So-
somehow.
I don't remember much about
So-
that.
No one does.
No. Nope.
I don't remember much of
So-
the first one
Yeah.
either.
And the thing about the Hitchhiker's Guide, where the title came from,
Yeah.
like the story he would tell is that he was hitchhiking around Europe, and they used to have like these hitchhiker's guides to Austria and England and stuff like that. He was laying drunk in a field in Innsbruck and was like, and looking up at the stars and said, "I wish someone would write a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy," sort of thing. And then he later on said, "I actually don't remember that, but I've told that story so many times that that's what I'm going with."
Hey, good
I'm
story.
like, yep, that works. Sounds good.
Again, very on par for
Yep.
him, it sounds like,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of everything.
I feel like a lot of writers and artists kind of make their own myth with good stories like that, whether they're true or not, you know?
I mean, doesn't that make for good storytelling, though?
Yeah.
If you can just sort of come up with this really like fantastical origin. It's like something that's be perfect out of
Yeah.
like a biopic, but like, I don't know. It's still good.
Hitchhiking in general, that's a thing we just missed.
Yeah.
Did you ever hitchhike ever? Because you're not that much.
No, I'm not much older than you. I don't really want to date myself. I'm a little
You don't have to.
Yeah, I mean, I never hitchhiked. It was still a little bit like, oh, you're gonna get picked up and there's gonna be a slasher and they're gonna kill you if
Yeah.
you're hitchhiking. So growing up, I was like, no.
That's what I figured because it's been quite a while now, but that's still something that fascinates me. That is a thing that people did, and that there's guides in Europe on how to do it back in the day. Like,
Yeah.
what does it just say? Like, just don't panic, obviously, on the front,
Mhm.
and then don't get murdered. Like, I don't know what else. Have an escape plan. What else do you have to know?
Right? Yeah. I mean, but is it almost like it was almost as much don't hitchhike as much as don't pick up a hitchhiker too, because
Oh,
you don't know
yeah.
who they are either.
Best thing to do if you were driving around with your friends is seeing someone who was, because I remember seeing people like even like when I was younger and driving hitchhiking would be like, not to be mean to the other person, you want to get close, but just be like to your friend, like, I think I'm going to pick them up, and like start to brake just a little and just see them sweat.
Oh my god. Never. I don't think I've ever even seen somebody hitchhiking. That's what's
I used to see him a lot more when I was younger,
yeah.
Mhm.
Man.
but yeah,
I think I was like 16 or 17.
Yeah. Man. Yeah, it's if it's ever happened, it's been a long time. So
I thought we had to talk about hitchhiking as in general.
No, I think
Hitchhiker's Guide episode.
that concept in itself, yeah, has become very dated. And I think it's like, yeah, the fact that you would even consider doing that now, I think it's just not a thing that happens anymore anywhere. So it makes this even more silly. So despite a low-key launch of the series, the first episode was broadcast at 10:30 p.m. on a Wednesday night back in 1978. And it received generally good reviews, though, and tremendous audience reaction for radio. The first book was then adapted from the first 4 radio episodes called The Primary Phase, with mostly about Arthur being rescued from Earth's destruction by Ford and meeting Zaphod and Trillian. Is it Zaphod? Is that, am I pronouncing that right?
Zaphod. Yep.
Okay. I'm also trying to remember the movie, which I haven't seen since the theater.
Yeah, it was funny because of like I read the book first
Sure.
and I thought it was Zaphod,
Oh,
something like that. And it wasn't until I heard the radio program that I was like, oh yeah, okay, it's Zaphod.
okay.
Yeah.
I feel like, yeah, the radio has to be like, that's like the tome. That's the
Mhm.
the Rosetta Stone for
Mhm.
this all.
That's
right?
kind of how I looked at it too. I'm like, for anything I didn't know how to pronounce, I'm like, okay, how do they say it there?
Okay, because especially as we get into like talk about books 2, 3, 4, like, and I have not heard any properties or like any adaptations of that. I've never actually heard any of the audiobooks or radio plays. So this is all you guys, if you have more content.
And to be honest, I'm trying to think when I was younger if I knew there were sequels, because I think I would have read more.
Yeah.
Or like listened to more. I knew later in life there were, but I just think that's kind of funny looking back. I think I was like, there's the one book.
yeah.
Yeah. So as it is right now, there are 5 phases of the radio show.
Mm-hmm.
But only the first 2 were written by Douglas Adams and produced by him. And those are the only two I ever really listened to because that was all there was for a long, long time. And
Sure.
then they made the tertiary, quaternary, and quintessential phases much later on. And a lot of them were written without after he died is the thing and recorded. So I haven't listened to any of those.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So one of these days.
It does feel like a really good, like, long road trip, like, mission if you had one.
Mm-hmm.
We did that with the Lord of the Rings. I don't know if it was BBC, but I'm assuming the radio show for that, which was that was a big staple in our household.
Oh man, the radio show of Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, the radio show was. I remember hearing like Sam kill, was it, what's this, Shelob, like in the back of my car, in my parents' car for the first time.
I think it is even fun though to think about the fact that like radio shows as they are here as we are doing a podcast, which is essentially modern radio show. But like radio shows in themselves like don't really exist in the same form that they did once upon a time either.
I love them because like my grandmother had a big box of cassettes. It was like a thing she bought probably from like late night cable, like 3 easy installments, but it had like horror stories, like wasn't like Gunsmoke, like all these not Amos and Andy, some sort of combination of names, all these kind of old stories. What's the guy on the horse with Tonto? I think the Lone Ranger. Like I had all those, and so I was like, I mean, I grew up in the 90s, but I was listening to a lot of radio shows.
I mean, I love the idea of a radio play. Like,
Oh, yeah.
we had to make one in college and actually learned later in life, rather recently, I had a great grandfather, I think, that was a radio show actor or radio play actor. So holding on the tradition.
Yeah, that's where you got that voice from.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's very interesting though, just thinking back on this because the production, like, I mean, like audiobooks are great. I think it's nice that you have somebody reading the story, but to have the whole like sound effects, you know, different actors doing all the parts and stuff, like that's a fun idea. Like, I don't know. I would love to see more radio plays, I think, come back in a modern form.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to one day explore the Hitchhiker's Guide radio shows.
One of my favorite episodes of Frasier is when he does the Nightmare Inn and he does his own radio play, and it's just a mess. It's so good.
I love. Don't they have like balloons for the gunshots?
People are just trying to like add in their own story, and he's like killing them off with the balloon, like bang a gunshot, bang a gunshot.
So the first book then was published in 1979, initially in paperback by Pan Books after BBC Publishing had turned down the offer to produce the book. Whoops.
Yeah.
That's tough. I think now that we are at this point, so what are the differences between the first book and the radio show?
Sure. I mean, the differences don't really start to show up until the second book.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there are differences here and there, right? Nothing as big as what shows up later on, though, is the thing. So the first book and the first 4 episodes of the radio show are pretty even.
Spot on. Okay.
Yeah. But once you get to the second book and the later episodes of the radio show, things about like even how they get to the restaurant at the end of the universe are different, right? The circumstances around that. There's an entire set of characters introduced in the radio show that you never see in the books at all.
No.
And some entire storylines that are completely different. There's an entire civilization that collapses because of the shoe event horizon, it's called, which is a thing where people start buying shoes. So they start building more stores, and then people start buying more shoes, and then more, and then until every store is a shoe store. And then everything this society collapses. Everyone evolves into birds, so they don't have to walk. And that's, the shoe event horizon is what it's been passed at that point. And that there's a reference made to it in the book, but there's an entire section where they're on a planet where this has happened. And there's a giant statue of Arthur Dent and on that planet and all this stuff. And it's just, it was really interesting listening to that after reading the books, because I'm like, who are these people? Who's Lintilla? Who is these other Poodoo and all these other characters that are introduced that you have no idea who they are, right?
Yeah.
It only exists there. And so the interesting thing being about being a fan of the Hitchhiker's Guide and like all of its adaptations is that in a lot of other fandoms you hear arguments about what's canon, right? And just to throw one out there, Star Wars, right? Everyone is like, what's canon, especially after Disney took over.
Yeah, the
Like,
canon universe. Yeah.
I don't care because everything is different in every adaptation. There's everything, like the radio show is different than the books, is different than the movie, is different than the text-based adventure game, right? Which is different than the towel, which is a thing that they printed a towel which had the first book on it, right? So it's like one of those things where it's like, oh, it's coming out in a different medium. Yeah, a lot of the bones will be the same, but the meat on the bones will be different, and it's like I'm just used to that. So it's like I don't sweat over canon too much because of that.
Yeah.
In other properties, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think that's always kind of the push and pull. And I was even gonna say the fact that I was like, well, was maybe the radio play like his test ride of being like, okay, when I novelize this, I'm gonna change it, like the George R. R. Martin method, maybe of like, I'm gonna change the end of this.
I'm not gonna do what you guys did. That was bad.
That was a bad idea. Give you that idea.
Yeah. Part of it is that some of the ideas that showed up in the radio show came from a friend of his. And so he didn't want to incorporate all that stuff into the books.
Sure.
So that's part of it. But I think the part of it is just then those changes led the book in a different direction than the radio show went. So
it does seem to revolve around very similar ideas, though, of just all these planets that go into some kind of collapse, right? Because of just very poor things that either like bad circumstances or just poor decision making.
Yeah, there's a lot of the beats are the same, right? It's just how you get to them is different.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. We should talk about the larger themes. I think once we get to, really getting into the meat of this. And so, like I said, I don't want to get too lost in the history here, but I did want to just note that like the first series was repeated twice in 1978 alone, and many more times in the next few years. This it led to an LP re-recording produced independently of the BBC for sale, and then a further adaptation of the series was made. I mentioned as a book, then a second radio series which consisted of an additional 5 episodes, which brought the total number of episodes to 12. Which I thought it said 6, so now I'm like, how did we get to 12?
Well, it's 6 in the first series, 6 in the second series.
Oh, okay. They said, I think they're completely discounting. There was 1 in there. So, anyway, so that was then broadcast in 1980, which was the same year that The Restaurant at the End of the Universe was then published. The book was. And so this is where you mentioned like some things went a little bit differently than the radio show, but what do you like better? Do you like the way the radio show did it, or do you like the way the book went about it?
That's a really interesting question.
I know you don't care about canon, but you got to pick your version.
Yes. Wow. I mean, obviously, the book holds a really special place in my heart because it was The Restaurant at the End of the Universe was my introduction. Thing, right. So hearing the events play out differently on the radio show was really jarring at first because it didn't happen the same way that I was expecting it to happen. That being said, there's a lot of stuff to like in the radio shows as well too. They're very well produced. The sound effects and everything are great. They were very state of the art for the time. And they still sound really good today. But I don't know. I probably would lean towards the book.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, you're asking me to pick between my children here, Tom. So
I mean, it's fine though. I think the book, I feel like it's the only written version of it, right? Whereas there's multiple radio recordings. There's multiple recordings, both audio book and radio play, and more than one radio recording. So I guess you kind of have to see that's almost like the tome of it all, right? But I don't know. I've only ever read the book too, so I would pick it as well.
I would check out the radio show when you get a chance. It's on the Internet Archive.
Ooh,
all of them.
Good tip.
So
we love the Internet Archive on this podcast.
We sure do. We stand for the Internet Archive. Popularity of the radio series gave rise to a 6-episode TV series directed and produced by Alan J.W. Bell, which first aired on the BBC Two in January and February of 1981. And actually employed many of the same actors from the radio series. So you had Simon Jones as Arthur Dent. I'm going to totally get these names completely. The prosthetic Vogan Jeltz.
Sure, I'll let it go.
Bill Wallace is the
Prosthetic
guy's
Vogan
name.
Jeltz.
Jeffrey McGivern is Ford Prefect. Joe Kendall is Lady Cynthia Fitzmelton. And then David Gooderson is the barman. The plots of the we mentioned that.
Wait,
already.
did you say Markwing Davy as Zaphod Beeblebrox? I think you missed that one.
Oh, I did not.
Mm.
Did he play it in the
He
TV show?
was in the radio, and then he played Zaphod in the show as well too.
See, this is why we have you, Aaron. You're providing all that. I don't even know why I'm reading. I'm just
I did not know who played Lady of Fitzmilton.
So a second series. This was actually the only series that was produced of the show. A second series was at one point planned. Again, for those who don't know, the British like to call a season a series. So while we're talking about a TV series at large, it is just a season. That's what they're referring to. They had planned it, but according to Alan Bell and Markwing Davy, that would have come from Adams' abandoned Doctor Who and the, what did you call it?
The Cricket Men.
The Cricket Men project. They have it spelled like with many Ks.
Yeah.
So instead of simply making a TV version of the second radio series, but Adams got into a dispute with the BBC, problems with budget, scripts, having Alan Bell involved, all of that above. And the second series was never made. But elements of Doctor Who and the Cricket Men were instead used in the novel The Life, Universe, and Everything, which was then published in 1982. So a lot happened in that span between 1979 and 1982. I mean, it seems like that's where the most of the series was produced for the most part.
Yeah, that's what it feels like for sure, because you had the radio, both series of the radio show, 3 books come out.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the TV show.
And then we had, and I'll just kind of fast forward here. So Long and Thanks for All the Fish, then published was in 1984. Mostly Harmless, the 5th book, was 1992. Then on June 21st, 2004, BBC announced via press release a new series based on Hitchhiker's 3rd novel would be broadcast as part of its autumn schedule. This is their BBC radio, I'm sorry. But it was delayed while there was an agreement reached with the Walt Disney Company over internet rebroadcasts as Disney began pre-production on the film. The 3rd series was broadcast in September and October of 2004. 4th and 5th were broadcast then in May and June of 2005, with the 5th series following immediately after the 4th. CD releases accompanied the transmission of the final episode in each series. I have to mention that because CDs.
That's how you know we're living in the future, is CDs.
Yeah, exactly. So after several years of, let's take a step back before we start talking about the movie, because I think we all have thoughts on the movie. Books at large, first 5 right there as it is. So you had read them all up until that point. You met Douglas Adams with that. And so you just knew at that point this was going to be like a staple in your life. Did you like all 5 of the books?
I did. The 5th book has been described as bleak. And it has its moments of, frivolity or whatever, but it does end on kind of a downer of a note. And that's a common criticism of that book. And it's funny because Douglas Adams has come out and had said the same thing too later on. He's like, yeah, it was, for reasons I'm not going to get into, it was a very bad year of my life. And then I wrote a book while I was doing it. And so the book didn't come out that great. Right. But if you step back and look at the series as a whole, you're like, oh yeah, it kind of makes sense in what's going on, because the way it ends, and spoiler alert, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Is that all of the universe, all of the Earths in every universe are destroyed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's how it ends. And it was the Vogons doing what they set out to do in the first book, which is destroy the Earth, right? And that's how the first book starts. is so that's probably not a spoiler alert because it's on the blurb on the back, I think. And so that's how it ends, right? And it's just kind of a downer a little bit.
Yeah. Because, okay, I mean, trying to summarize this series would be a yeoman's task, I think. But, I mean, essentially, if we had to boil it down, the story at large here before we talk about like book 6 and all that, it's right. Like the Earth is getting destroyed. Fort Prefect, who's an alien, is on Earth. He saves Arthur. Start literally hitch a ride on the Vogon ship that destroys the world.
Mm-hmm.
And they meet Trillian and Zaphod. They start. I mean, take it from here. I mean, what
wow. Oh boy. How can I sum it up? Yeah. So Ford and Zaphod are cousins, third cousins or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Zaphod was elected president of the universe. Trillian turns out to be Trisha McMillan, who was an Earthling, which you don't find out until a little bit later, who met Zaphod at a party, and then he was like, "Hey, I'm an alien, want to go fly away?" And she's like, "Sure." And the funny thing is, Arthur was also at that party talking to Trillian before it all happened. And then Zaphod blew in and took her. And so Arthur was all mad about that. And all of this happens, and this is all still the first book, right? So it's like how much you go. But as part of being the president, you know, the Zaphod steals a ship with the improbability drive. And they're looking for a lost planet that used to manufacture planets. They end up finding it. They meet Slarty Bartfast, who is the only person awake. They've been awakened, though, to rebuild a new Earth because of the first Earth. Well, it turns out it was a computer that was trying to figure out the answer to the ultimate answer of life, the universe, and everything. To find the question.
Right, because we know the answer.
Because we know 42. The answer is 42, right? That's a whole big thing where they built a computer to figure out what the answer was, and after 7.5 million years, it said, "Oh yeah, the answer is 42," and everyone's like, "Oh great, what's the question?" And they're like, "Oh, now we got to build a bigger computer." And right before it spit out what the question was, like literally 5 minutes, it was destroyed by the Vogons, right? That's the whole thing. And I'm still only covered like the first book at this point, so and then they go on adventures, and so
which leads them, I mean, it basically kind of gets into the whole idea of like they're trying to like, I don't know, like they're trying to find the answer to they're trying to find the question to the answer.
And so what happens is in the end of the second book, they end up stranded in a prehistoric version, Ford and Arthur has a bag of tiles, Scrabble tiles, and it's like, maybe if I introduce some random component, I can figure out what it is, because Marvin, the paranoid android, said, "Oh, I can see the question in your brain waves." And so they're like, maybe if I just try to do something randomly, you can figure it out. He pulls out tiles, and it spells out, what is 9 times 6? And we're like, that's not 42. But then, of course, all the nerds were like, "Well, it is if you use base 13." And then Douglas Adams was like, "You don't write jokes in base 13." That's a very famous thing he said. And then after that, they get off that. Then they have the adventure with the Cricket Men, which is a story about a planet of people that vowed to like destroy everyone in the universe. And so they got trapped in a bubble of slow time and locked away, and except for one little ship that opens the bubble and lets them out, and it's a story about them trying to prevent the destruction of the entire universe. And of course they don't succeed in destroying the universe, which is great. They stop them. And then the fourth book is Arthur ends up back on an alternate Earth that had been pulled into his universe by the dolphins. Left, and they just disappeared one day, and people didn't know why, and it was because they were leaving the original Earth before it got destroyed. And their final message to everyone was, "So long and thanks for all the fish." And so that's where that comes from. And he meets a woman named Fenchurch. They fall in love. And that's kind of what the fourth book is about, is Arthur Dent's love life.
I'm like, I might have started the fourth book now that you're talking about it.
Yeah.
I'm like,
And then the fifth book is where it gets wrapped up.
And then they destroy
And
everything.
then everything just gets destroyed.
Very different series, but know what it's making me think of right now?
What's that?
The Dark Tower.
Oh, yeah.
Because like you get these different people, and then you have like an Earth person, and like you have different worlds. And the fourth book, the person falls in love, whereas in the fourth book, Wizard and Glass, it's a flashback to a romance story that just takes place. They're both cosmic in a sense,
Yeah.
but just very different tones and styles.
It is very parallel, which like, but I think didn't Stephen King, he wrote that all after Hitchhiker's Guide.
I think, well, when did the first book
I think
come out?
Gunslinger was like 1978
76?
or 76. Yeah, maybe. Very
And he
early.
doesn't really make it that style of story till quite later. So maybe there was he got influenced by it, as different as they are.
What I'll say for this, and I'm going to transition this back to Hitchhiker's Guide, is that I think because he got a lot of heat for the end of Dark Tower, and we won't spoil that because it's not this podcast, but his kind of whole point was that it's more about the journey than the ending. And I do think when you read Hitchhiker's Guide, or even just take it in any way, that's kind of what it's about, right? It's about this journey, this trip, this adventure they're on, versus like the question doesn't matter.
Oh,
Like,
for sure. Yeah. It like his whole deal was like, I wanted to write a bunch of jokes. And then if I wrote myself into a plot hole, I would have someone make a joke or say something offhand that would fix the situation. And that was a lot of what it was. And it just so happened that it was funny. But it also, you could also follow these people in their adventures throughout the universe.
yeah, which I think is like, I know you're like, oh, the ending's bleak, but it's like, but at the end of the, I mean, well, it's not the ending. So I am curious then. So, I mean, maybe we should talk about book 6 before we talk
All
about
right.
the
Yeah.
movie.
Let's the elephant in the room, as it were.
Yeah. So, okay. So then let me just tee this up for you here. It was announced in September 2008 that, okay, now I'm really going to mess this one up. Ewan Colfer?
I never knew how to say his first name.
I prefer the second one.
Ian? Could just be Ian.
Could be.
Author of Artemis Fowl, had been commissioned to write the 6th installment entitled And Another Thing, with the support of Jane Belson, who was Douglas Adams' widow. And so how did this come to be and why?
And it's interesting because by that point I had stopped frequenting like Usenet and the user groups and stuff, that the mailing list that I had been a part of. And so that I did not know that was coming out until I happened to walk into a Barnes and Noble with a friend of mine. And we were both like, what is this book right here? And it was right after it had come out.
Oh, wow.
And so I, of course, picked it up. But I don't know anything about where it came from, how it was decided, he would, and I'm saying he because I don't know how to say his first name right, would decide how, like, that he was going to write it or whatever. But I picked it up and I read it once. And that's all and I still have it, but I have not revisited it at all.
Yeah.
And part of it was because when I got done, it felt to me like fan fiction,
No.
was the thing.
Rise of Skywalker-esque.
It's a whole nother discussion. If you want to get into that side, we could. But yeah, it felt like someone was like, oh, I got these characters from different parts of the series earlier on, and I'm going to put them in this situation and see what happens.
Yeah.
And it was a fine book, but it felt like fan fiction was the thing. Because at least I remember at the time that was my impression when I was talking with my friend about it too, and he felt the same way. And so that was kind of where I've left it. And it's a book and it's there, and I've never revisited it.
Yeah. I was just very curious about that because I have a complicated like perspective of when you have a series, like, so take about like the Dark Tower with Stephen King or something like that, of when you try to introduce another author, another creator, when you have somebody who is so synonymous with that series. And this is like Douglas Adams, like crowning achievement of his life, right? It's the Hitchhiker's Guide series, and like the whole story is his story. So to have someone else come in and write like a 6th installment and be like, well, this is canon because we commissioned it and we got the blessing of his like widow, but it's like, sure, but at the end of the day, it's not him writing it.
Right.
So I don't know. I was just very curious if you were like, no, this is so good, like it needs to be part of it. You're like, and what I expected.
Yeah.
It's like feels like fan fiction.
Yep.
It's kind of, yeah, it's Disney's attempt at trying to continue a story, which for all the shit the prequel series of Star Wars gets, it's still George Lucas telling the story, and it feels a little more tied into the story he was trying to tell versus like, but what if Palpatine fucks? So very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I think I don't know if we want to spend some time talking about the books, or maybe we just talk about the movie quick, and then we can kind of get into the whole story at large, and maybe because this will kind of launch us into that. Because the movie, let me read this quick, and then I'm gonna be done looking at notes, or at least like looking at the several years of setbacks and renewed efforts to start production. And a quarter of a century after the first book was published, the big screen adaptation of Hitchhiker's Guide was finally shot. Pre-production began in 2003. Filming was in 2004. And the movie finally came out. It was in 2005, but this was just or shortly after Douglas Adams actually died, right? So I guess he was involved in the film's production, helped with some early screenplays and concepts. And before his death of a heart attack in May 2001, Adams was considering writing a 6th novel that eventually got rewritten or put somewhere else. Because he was working on Dirk Gently, or a third Dirk Gently novel. You mentioned Dirk Gently. I don't know what a Dirk Gently is. What is this?
So it's another series.
Okay.
Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency is the name of the first novel, and it's Dirk Gently, who's a holistic detective. Oh my gosh. That is very hard to say out loud. Let me just say that. Wow, there's a lot of T's in those words. Holistic detective. Oh my God. Anyway.
I get it.
So thank you. And like his whole thing is like everything's connected. And so, you know, he's like, I'll find my cases and they'll come to me. And then I just start walking in a direction and I'll find something I need for my case. Is kind of what it's all about. And the books are a lot of fun. And the whole holisticness of it does come into play, where it's like stuff that's set up at the beginning, which you think doesn't mean anything, is totally wrapped up and, you know, brought full circle by the end of the book. And so he wrote 2 books, and then was working on third, The Salmon of Doubt.
Yes.
Which they released a book called The Salmon of Doubt after he died, which contained as much of they could of that story, which is, and I got it, I read it, and it sucked because the story was just getting really, really good, and then it ended.
Oh.
And you're reading, you're like, okay, great, boom, 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 and then it's done. You're like, oh no.
That's all you got.
But so that came out, and there actually was a series on somewhere. I think it was BBC US or something released it, a series recently called Dirk Gently. And it wasn't strictly based on the books. It was just the character, but that whole like idea of holisticness was there, and stuff that, you know, was set up in the first episode kind of came back and then was paid off later on. So I like the TV series as well too.
I feel like I've heard about it, but I'm never familiar with it.
Yeah, I know. I saw ads for the show.
Yeah. So it was much more about the idea of this guy as this holistic detective. Oh my God.
Holistic detective.
Thank you.
Detective.
Say it for me.
I want to say it out loud now.
Yeah.
It's fun to say. Holistic detective.
Yeah. So
which it sounds interesting that he was working on this novel, then he started working on Salmon of Doubt, and because they're implying that it sounds like he was starting to consider introducing concepts early on from the Salmon of Doubt into the Hitchhiker's movie, but died before they could really do anything with that.
Yeah, it turns out that like when he talked about the Salmon of Doubt, it was going to be the third Dirk Gently, but he's like, there's some ideas in it that would work better as a Hitchhiker's idea. And so we're all like, ooh, maybe we'll get a third Dirk Gently and then a 6th Hitchhiker's book, you know? And then we ended up getting neither, at least by Douglas Adams. So yeah, but that was it. And there was a lot of chatter on the news groups that I was a part of at the time as well too about the movie, because even back in the late 90s, like 98, 99, when I was really active in Usenet, the Usenet groups, just to date myself a little bit more, there had been talks about the movie for a long time. And since I think the mid 80s is when movie talk started, right? And I think even in the late 90s, that time frame, 98, 99, 2000, they knew something was coming up, and he was flying to LA to work on stuff, and we knew about it, and we were talking about it back then on the use groups with all the different people that
I've never heard of the Usenet either. And this is
yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
we can talk. Maybe there's a whole nother episode about early internet ways to communicate with people.
Well, you've got me thinking about like, yeah, how did we use the internet before like Google came along? Because and the quickest of quickest asides, but there's a joke in one of the late seasons of Buffy, which came out like 2001, 2002, where someone says like, "Oh, use Google," and they're like, "What the hell? What kind of spell is that?" or something like that. They're like, "No, it's an internet search engine," and it's just like, oh my god! Like there's a joke in this show about not knowing what Google is. Like I'm like this, and you can't not know what Google is today. You can't not like, but it's just very funny to think that like like in the early days, you did have to like find forums. You had to find like all these different places. One of the things I will mention when I started learning about Hitchhiker's Guide from friends was I was using Internet Movie Database, IMDb, like the very early. I was on those message boards. Fred probably saw me like, "Who's this guy?" I was in all the Star Wars ones, being like, "Oh, actually, Attack of the Clones was good."
So yeah, Usenet was just a distributed user forums, right? And so the way it worked was you would have probably like a local Usenet server, and then you would just say, "I want to subscribe to these groups," and then changes would get pushed down to your local server, but everything was distributed. So it was entirely possible there would be groups you wouldn't have no idea that existed because your local server didn't have a subscription to them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so there was a Douglas Adams ones. It was Alt Fans Douglas Adams. And that was kind of how they were all, it was like alt dot something, right? Or they even had, that was how they were referred to.
Yeah.
And then mailing lists, which were what they sound like. You would sign up to this mailing list, you would get emails, and then you could just respond to people's emails, and everyone who was there would get the email back as well too. So it was the Wild West back then of just you communicated with people however you could.
Yeah, really, truly. It's impossible to think and contextualize what the internet was to what it is now. It's just,
which is really interesting when you think about what the Hitchhiker's Guide was, right? Was this little book that had all the information in the world at your fingertips, right? And so if you think about it, it's like, oh yeah, that's a tablet with Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Right? But this was 1978 when this was conceptualized. So it was like, okay, that's pretty cool, pretty forward thinking. So,
well, I mean, I know I always get into this conversation too. Like, does technology in like shows and movies end up informing our reality? Like and nothing has ever like struck me as much as like the tricorder in Star Trek, where they can use it to diagnose like people who are hurt or sick or whatever. And like, I think they actually invented something in real life like that now, that like doctors can like scan people and be like, oh, and I think that's what ended up having or kind of became like the fever detector. Like when, especially during COVID, when maybe they were like, okay, you needed to get like an infrared thing without having to put this under everyone's mouth. And they're like, yep, you got like 100 fever, it's like, you probably are sick. So it's so interesting to think that, someone might have been thinking about the Hitchhiker's Guide and been like, how do we get just one little thing? Or these things, right? It's like our phones.
Yep. So back to the movie.
So the movie soldiered on. Again, we have Martin Freeman as Arthur, Yassine Bey as Ford Prefect, and I was like, is Yassine Bey? I thought he went by something else though.
Most Def.
That's him. Thank you. Sam Rockwell as Zayfi, which I think that's a great cast. Zoe Deschanel as Chilean. I don't know about that cast.
You know, the thing about Trillian is she isn't much of a character.
Yeah.
Just in general is the thing, right? And so it is. I feel like someone maybe who was a little more not Zoe Deschanel might have been a little bit more in the, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I like Zoe Deschanel. But
I feel like she's a little too airy. Like she's so like she looks like she floats. Like that's kind of the impression I give. Like I would have loved maybe someone a little more self-assured, you know, or like not like a Charlize Theron or something like that. Like that almost been way too intense, but you know what I mean? Just somebody who maybe has like more of a perspective, a point of view, and can be a little more assertive than someone like Zoe Deschanel, who
Amy Adams, maybe a little too early at the time, but
still could have been a really good pick for that. We can Dreamcast it in the future here if we talk about adaptations, but then of course the great Alan Rickman was the voice of Marvin the Paranoid Android with Warwick Davis, who was in the costume, which was very fun, and then Stephen Fry as the narrator. So movie not so great. Or did you like it?
I liked it. You know, but I went in with the expectation that it wasn't going to be the exact same story as I had read or heard on the radio. Right.
You can listen to 2 hours.
Yeah. And so it was, and I had known that a lot of the changes that were coming were things Douglas Adams had come up with as well. So the changes from the books didn't bother me at all.
Sure.
And I still got to see a lot of the cool things. I got to see the Earth blow up.
So long and thanks for all the fish song.
Well, yeah, exactly. We got to meet Slarty Birdfast, which was the great Bill Nye.
yes, so good in it.
Yeah.
I told you.
And and Marvin was great. You know, Alan Rickman playing Marvin was really great too. So I mean, I liked the movie for sure.
Yeah, I think like the first 45 minutes is really, really great. And the back half is fine. I just think it maybe loses itself being an adaptation that's shorter with it kind of has to breeze through a lot of information that it can't give enough context to. So it's kind of a little hard to follow in the back half. But I watched it today and going back to it, I thought that was what I thought. I liked seeing like I think the Jim Henson Company did the what are they called?
The Vogons.
The Vogons. There is some like questionable CG in it, but there is a lot of practical stuff in it. And again, like I think Sam Rockwell, Alan Rickman / Warwick Davis, because I think it's a two-handed performance. The physical performance is really good in it. And I really love Bilbo.
Oh, Martin Freeman.
I love Martin Freeman because at that time, I think when I saw the movie, I think this is the right time frame. I was getting into the beginning of The Office and finding out that there was the British Office, and I was watching the British Office, and I really liked Martin Freeman in the British Office because it's like those are like the last few times we saw like nice guy Martin Freeman. Now he's kind of a dick all the time.
Yeah.
And I've seen him in interviews. He's kind of a dickish guy, but like I still like him and stuff.
He plays a dick pretty well. In Fargo, holy shit, is he good?
I have not seen that one yet.
Oh, the Fargo TV show. It's good stuff.
Just him.
It's on the list, but there's so much stuff to watch.
It's hard to watch it all.
You'll get sucked in though. It's just him and Billy Bob going back and forward, and Billy Bob is incredible in that show. But you look at something like the movie because I'm going off of a memory of one not knowing the story, so I'm trying to follow it. I remember kind of being hard to follow because they were condensing the story. Two, I think the other thing working against this is, and it's kind of something we've talked around since the beginning, is trying to come up or present a British property to Americans and get them in on it is a tough sell for a lot of people sometimes. I think people who love British shows and movies like love this stuff, but not everybody's a big fan. And I mean, look at what I feel like this is the third time we're talking about this in like 3 days. The Robbie Williams movie. What is it? Better Man?
Oh,
The instant classic Better Man.
Yeah. But it's like, right? Like, how many people here pan that movie just being like, who the fuck is Robbie Williams?
Yeah.
But meanwhile, all the critics are like, this movie's good. Like,
Yeah, that was me. I knew that was a person who sang songs in England. And then I watched the movie and I was like, this movie's great. I like some of these songs.
yeah. But I feel like if I revisited Hitchhiker's Guide now, even knowing that I probably think the book is superior, or there's probably other superior versions, I probably would enjoy it a lot more. Just knowing like, hey, this is more of my sensibility. Now knowing a little more of the actors and everything too, and just taking it for what it is.
Well, and it's interesting, right? Because you talk about the Britishness of everything. There are the jokes that I did not get until many years after I read the book. And one of them is Ford Prefect's name.
Oh.
Because in the book, they're saying, yeah, he made a mistake in what he thought the dominant species was, and that's why he picked the name Ford Prefect. And I was just like, okay, whatever, when I first read it, right? It would have made more sense to Americans if they said, yeah, and he picked the name Ford Escort. Because the Prefect was a Ford car, right? And so he mistaked cars as being the dominant, right? And it's one of those things that I didn't get it. And so it's just some of that stuff because of it, right? That's just, okay, I get it now.
Yeah.
Now it's like, oh, it was cars, right? But so, yeah, so that some of that stuff just, you have that makes it all that much harder, right? To translate some of that stuff. And you talk about, taking that book and everything and condensing it down.
Yeah.
It was a challenge for sure.
But you talk about it at large, though, too. And I think that's where we can really start getting into the meat of the things. I mean, keep our conversation going, getting out of the history here a little bit of just, a lot of the jokes. It is sort of that dry British humor within all this. Like you even mentioned, like the dolphins leaving and being like, so long and thanks for all the fish. I mean, I think that's a funny ass joke. Like, it's just like, of course, they're just, hey, you guys are great. Thanks for feeding us, right? Like it's almost like something you expect a dog to say, like, thanks for feeding me. I'm out. But I think that is when you get sold on that aspect, and that's what I want to hear you guys talk about a little bit too, of just why it had this lasting impact of being the series one that people responded to at the time, but that people still continue to respond to as people find this. Maybe they see the book at a library. Doubtful, probably online now, if I'm being honest. But it's something that you dig into, and you're just like, oh, this is such a quirky, fun little story. It's so different than any other sci-fi story I think that you do run into that is about space, because everything's so political and so big. And I mean, you mentioned bureaucracy, right? Like that's like the running theme on the undercurrent. But I know. I mean, and I'll stop talking here. But I just want to hear what you guys. Just thoughts on like the lasting impact and like why has this had such popularity?
I'll just say one thing while you're thinking on it. Just as like a lasting impact, listening to it last night, why I think it could still be a text that people could find and relate to is it has a way of taking kind of themes that are like upsetting and bleak and making it digestible in a comedic way. And I just was thinking a lot about the world listening the like first half of this again last night. I mean, Zaphod has got a lot of similarities to certain presidents in certain countries at the moment. Just kind of the destruction to building like a bypass and the parallel that they're destroying Earth to build a bypass through there. Just like, you could look at that as like an environmental thing. You could look at it as just like a political thing. So I was, because the world's super good right now. I was thinking a lot of the modern world and everything going on. And I was able to connect with those themes, and it felt digestible instead of like maybe watching something like The Last of Us and watching like Jeffrey Wright like torture someone.
Yeah.
Like, this is this is prescient to now, but do I feel good about it? No, not really. So that's why I think it does kind of have it has a reason to get back at people and kind of be reintroduced, and hopefully he finds a newer or younger audience.
Yeah. And what you said too about the bureaucracy, right? Is a lot of that is in the first book. because his house is going to be destroyed to make room for a bypass, which he had just found out about, right? And the whole thing is like, oh, we posted a notice. He's like, yeah, it was at the bottom of stairs or in the basement. The stairs were gone. It was in an unused bathroom inside of a locked cabinet with a sign that said "Beware the leopard" on it, right? And then the Earth gets destroyed, and the same sort of thing happens. The Vogons are like, "Well, it was posted in Alpha Centauri. Didn't you guys see it? It's just the closest thing." And so, and then this horrible thing starts it, right? The Earth explodes. Everyone except for Arthur Dent, and then you find out later Trillian has died,
Right.
and then. But you're not upset about it,
Mm-hmm.
which is the funny thing, because you're following this guy and you realize he's dealing with this and you can deal with it too. But then you also realize that everything is much bigger than you thought.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more magic and humor in the world, right? And I think that's definitely something that you can find. And then, of course, the jokes are so great.
Well, the joke's even implying that like humans are not the master species, right? Or the most intelligent species. It's the dolphins, it's the mice, it's the it's like, it's the idea that like we're overlooking these animals that have had such a simple way of like we played, like I kind of mentioned dogs before too. It's like, have they not played us? They're just like, yeah, you guys take care of us, you feed us, you shelter us, like it's like you're doing all the work. Like I'm just living my life, man. Like
Yeah. No, yeah, because there's a thing in the books, right, where they're like, when they talk about the dolphins specifically, and they're like, people look at dolphins and think they're dumb because all they do is play in the water all day and hang out. And dolphins think they're a lot smarter because that's what they do all day, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, that actually is a really good point.
yeah.
And the whole idea too about the entry for the Earth that's in the guide is harmless. That's it, is one word.
Mm-hmm.
And then Ford's like, well, I was able to get it amended a bit because he had been on Earth for like 15 years and submitted all this stuff. And they're like, well, what does it say now? And it says, oh, mostly harmless,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's that whole thing is like, you're not special just because you're a person,
Yeah.
because you're a human, right? So I don't know. It's just a lot of fun to read too. Is the thing.
It is. And I think you mentioned something too, that the universe is so much bigger. And I think, Fred, kind of going off what you're saying right now, I think when I read this at first, I was like, oh, yeah, it's so disappointing. Like the Earth gets destroyed. I wonder if they can bring it back. And like now, if I feel like I'm being disturbed by the Earth getting destroyed, I'm like, well, it's probably our time. Like, it's like, yeah, universe sounds good. Get out of here.
Resistance is futile.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, I'm just quoting the book.
yeah, that's it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
But no, I think you guys are hitting on all the biggest things though about this, right? It is funny. And I think that's something that will bring you in, assuming you are somebody who can give yourself over to British humor and enjoy a dry joke. I mean, I hate calling British humor dry. I don't think it's dry. I think it's smart. Like, and it makes you think. It's like good improv. You don't just have somebody doing a dumb impression in front of you, like, oh, I'm Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's like, no, it's like, say something funny, say something interesting, say something or do something interesting, and then you follow the funny and see where something goes. And you're like, oh my God, somebody's making this all up on the spot. It's incredible. And then there's something to be said for the fact that, yeah, he does just sort of like hand wave all the potential plot holes or the potential pitfalls of like, this doesn't matter. This isn't what it's about. It's about all this fun. And here, I'm going to just set up another joke here. So stick along for the ride. Let's see what else is happening. Now it's like, yeah, Marvin talked to these people or this ship into killing itself. Like, it's like, because they're so bored. It's just these funny themes that carry forward, but also it's like it's always in these like kind of high stakes situations all throughout, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's something that I think is fun about going through this, and I'm kicking myself for not finishing this series yet. Now that we're talking about it, I'm like, man,
There's still time.
Yes.
Before the Earth blows up.
Yes. Let this be your guide.
Yeah.
oh,
I didn't know what the right word to say, so I picked that one. To finishing the series.
But yeah, I guess. Do we want to talk a little, since we've talked about all the adaptations and everything? We want to talk about some Show Me the Franchise?
Sure. One quick thing before
Yeah.
we do that. It's not much to talk about, but something that just hit me when I was going through listening again last night about like influence and legacy of the writing style. Another author I thought about a lot, which is more of like a young adult children's author, was Lemony Snicket. If you've ever read one of those books, the writing style is very similar to Douglas Adams. And that was just one of my takeaways going back to it last night.
Yeah, that's interesting because I've read about half of the
Same.
Unfortunate series. Just because I felt like maybe I'm too old. That I wasn't hitting me quite the way, but like I did enjoy them, and I've read some of his other books as well too. Yeah, and I totally get what you're seeing, right? Because there is that sort of like there's addressing the audience with stuff, which is what the guy does in the books and everything too. And yeah, there's that sort of weird deadpan type of humor in those books as well too. So
It's almost like the narration is kind of conversational, right? Is that
That's what it's probably is, the conversational narrating, and there's almost kind of like an instruction to it where Douglas Adams is kind of maybe breaching big ideas or sci-fi concepts, where Lemony Snicket is kind of like introducing you to a big word that you might not know because you're a child, but they're done in the exact same way.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it actually does make you think back to like Monty Python and the Holy Grail a little bit too, and I'm like, and I, not to keep coming back to that same thing, but it's like, you do kind of see these influences sort of like sneak through of like, I mean, not to say that he would have given that idea, but just sort of that idea, that type of humor. And I think there's a through line there. Is Lemony Snicket also British?
No, I think he's American.
Yeah,
Dan, his name's like Dale or Dan something.
yeah, I don't remember, but yeah, I think he's just a regular American dude,
It's like Irish.
which is even weirder, right? Because it feels British.
Very British. Yeah.
The Unfortunate series books.
I do. It does have that vibe. I guess I've only seen the Jim Carrey movie, so I'm not engaged with the rest of it. But very interesting to note either way. But yeah, let's show me the franchise.
Show me the franchise.
You said the thing.
This is our formerly known as the coulda, woulda, shoulda segment. One day we'll get past that part, but I mean that's setting up the idea of like things that you wish could have been done differently, should have been done differently, or things that still could have happened, or still could happen, or should happen, or things that maybe you want to just see happen. I guess if you had one thing on top of your mind, Aaron, what is something that you would have wanted to see?
Wow. I mean, obviously a sixth book written by Douglas Adams, right, is the thing I would have loved to see.
Finishing the what is it called? Fistful of Salmon? I forget it now.
Fistful of salmon.
No, that's a different series, I think. Salmon of Doubt, right?
Salmon of Doubt, yeah.
Whatever the sixth book would have been, would have been really great. I mean, obviously didn't happen because he died, which was a sad day for sure.
Yeah.
So a sixth book would have been great. It would have been interesting to see how the movie would have turned out if he would have been able to be more involved with the production and the screenwriting as well too. A lot of the ideas that showed up in the movie were his, especially the changes, but it would have been nice to see maybe what the final product would have been if he would have had a chance to live with those changes a little bit more. Oh boy, maybe that's the wrong word to use there, live, but to iterate over those ideas and see how they sort of change. So it's one of those things that it would have been nice to see.
Yeah. I mean, it's very sad because I did just have to look up his age when he died. He was only 49.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Super young.
Very young. Yeah.
So, I mean, he had probably stories left in him to tell, whether it would have been more Hitchhiker's Guide or Dirk Gently, or what Dirk Gently kind of makes me think of. Sorry, quick aside. I always think of Dirk Diggler. It's the only other famous Dirk that I can Fred's just like nodding and Paul Thomas Anderson right there. Phillips.
I'm just thinking of the perfect large penis joke, but I don't have one.
But I think those are good picks, though, either way. I mean, just to see what he could have come up with in those regards. What about a new adaptation?
That would be interesting to see, right? A new adaptation, if there was. What I would like to see if there were another adaptation was it start out as an audio thing, because that's where it started, was the radio.
Mm-hmm.
And so if a new adaptation were to come along, it'd be an interesting way to sort of tackle it and, sort of take it back to where it started, right? But figure out a way to utilize a lot more of the new technology that's come out, right?
Yeah.
Although I gotta say that original radio shows still sound really, really good. But that would be an interesting thing to see if there were going to be a new adaptation. I think that would be a place to start, right? It could just be a small podcast or something like that. Even,
sure.
right? It would be maybe that would be a way to handle it too, is that it's presented as a podcast of someone hitchhiking around the galaxy, right?
I do kind of love like the way you can engage with that, of like you are like following someone's perspective in that regard versus telling like this story over and again of like the same thing of like, and here is Arthur, no, that's a fun idea. I guess my mind originally went to like streaming series, which I am almost shocked that nobody's optioned that yet. I mean, we're trying to remake Harry Potter here, but a lot of head shaking around the room. People can't see or listening on audio, but yeah, I mean,
that would be cool too, right? That would give you a chance to do justice to cover all of this story as well too, right?
Yeah, because I think streaming has its downfall in some regard in the way it tells stories, but it does feel like I always thought too. I'm like, a TV show does give you the flexibility though to tell the story to the length that you need it to in digestible chunks. Okay, here's like the first couple chapters in like an hour-long episode or 40 minutes or whatever it is, right? And then you can go on to the next couple chapters. And that way it's like, it is almost like how the BBC did it, but just like you're continuing to go all the way through the series then, so you can see it from start to finish. I don't know. What are some other things you guys would want to see differently? I don't know, Fred, if you had any ideas.
Well, first off, Fistful of Salmon sounds like a really good Western with bears. So I think I'm going to lean into adaptation, but I think what I want could potentially happen, but it really should have happened like 20 some years ago, would be like a series. And I kind of want it to be done by like the Mighty Boosh people. Maybe have someone with a little bit of their hand on the steering wheel more than they do, because their shit's a little wacky. But I think about like the style of that kind of show, or I even think about, I wouldn't have actual Wes Anderson make it, but that would be cool if he could do them all. But that just wouldn't happen. But I'm thinking of The Life Aquatic of Steve Zissou, the way they do the effects in that. I kind of want it to have like a throwbacky old look to it. I don't want like state-of-the-art special, effects or anything. I think it would be cool to have that kind of comic sensibility of those shows like Mighty Boosh, Garth Marenghi, because it is a little bit in there. So kind of just adding another layer on, because I think having the radio, having the audio, the audiobook, and having the movie, we have a kind of more succinct tone. But it would be fun to kind of remix it a little, make it a little wackier out there, but do have that kind of story still driving through all the books.
Well, and something else I was thinking about too is, what about like an animated series that gives you more of that flexibility to kind of just make things whatever they are? Because I feel like that's always the answer to like, if this is going to be too wacky and like you can't really lean into the cheek of it all, like at least animation is going to give you the flexibility to just make the reality whatever you want it to be.
Yeah, because there are some weird things to try to visualize, right? Like the whole Zaphod has 2 heads and 3 arms.
Yeah.
And, Douglas Adams said, yeah, I can say that on the radio because you don't have to see it, right, as a thing. And so, but then all of a sudden you bring it to a visual medium. You're like, how do you do this? And the TV show had a fake head that looked really dodgy. And in the movie, it was they weren't side by side on Sam Rockwell. It was one underneath his main head that just popped up every once in a while.
It looked bad.
It was really kind of weird. So, so animation, yeah, I think would be a good way to handle that stuff for sure, because you don't have to worry about some of those dodgy live action effects.
Yeah,
So
I appreciate your use of the word dodgy here. This is a very British term to be used
felt
for.
like, yeah, it felt like the right one
Yeah.
to say there.
But no, I think that's it's at least an opportunity for them to look at something else. I mean, do you want to see any more books? Anyone else try their hand?
I don't know. You know, I don't know if there's anyone that could catch that tone. Maybe though, Lemony Snicket might, because you bring that up, and it's like, you know what, there is that same sort of feel,
Yes.
right, to the books, and so that would be an interesting sort of thing to see, right?
Mm,
But I don't know. I don't know where the story could go.
yeah.
Is the thing. So, you know, we could maybe see some of the other characters, but you know, I'm not clamoring for any more books, to be quite honest. So
Sure.
just to have another book. So.
Yeah. That's fair. Appreciate the story as it is.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I think that's totally fair. I would have been interested to see the sequel movies though. I got hyped around the Restaurant at the End of the Universe after I saw the first movie, and I mean Sam Rockwell's he's my guy. I loved him.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like and Restaurant at the End of the Universe feels like a very Zaphod heavy book. So having him just sort of like leading that would have been kind of fun on TV, but that's all right. Wasn't meant to be.
Yeah. Nope.
Anything else you guys can think of?
No.
Do you want to talk power rankings then?
Yeah.
So our power rankings this week, and Aaron, you're gonna have the honor of doing first or going first here. Ranking your top 3 characters.
My top 3 characters. So number 3 for me, I'll go 3-1, is a character he's shows up in the which book does he show up in? I don't remember. He does then actually show up in the 6th book too, which is why it felt kind of fan fiction-y to me, right? They took this one sort of side small character, and then now he's the main antagonist of the book, and it's so weird. But anyway, great character. Wowbager, the Infinitely Prolonged is his name. Yeah, and the whole deal is there was an accident with a time machine, and now he's basically immortal. And he's very angry about it. And his whole deal is his life goal. I mean, his goal, right, is to go around and insult every single being in the universe. And that's all he does. He like rolls up, gets out of his spaceship, and would be like, "Hey, you're stupid and ugly. Okay, see ya," and then leave. And it starts out where he does it to Arthur Dent in the beginning of the book, and then the book ends with him landing where they're pretty sure it's the prehistoric Earth, right? He gets out and he looks up. Oh, Arthur Dent, wait a minute, I did you already, didn't I? And then he leaves. And so it's just, I don't know, it's just such a fun little, you know, piece of world building, right?
Yeah.
So that's number 3. Number 2, I think, is Zaphod.
Yeah.
I don't know what else I can say about that guy. He's just zany,
Yeah.
wacky. The whole thing where he's got 2 heads, and they're like, he installed a 3rd arm to help with his ski boxing. It's like, what the heck is ski boxing? Why do you need a 3rd arm for it, right? And his whole, you know, he cauterized part of his brain to hide what he really wanted to do as president and all this other sort of stuff. It's just so interesting. And he's just a great character.
Yeah.
And then I think my number 1, it would be Marvin, the paranoid android. So he's just a great character.
Yeah.
You know, clinically depressed, which is so weird. So seems very British though, right? And just sort of, I think, a weird commentary. Maybe weird's not the right word, but like a commentary on where we end up with our technology now. It feels even more applicable to today's world, right? Where we're getting more and more devices and AI starting to show up and all this other sorts of stuff. And
Yes.
and you know, the whole thing is like, oh, great, now we built a robot. Oh, and we made him depressed. It's like, why would you build a robot that's depressed, right? But he has some of the best one-liners. He ends up, because of time travel shenanigans and everything, ends up being like 3 times older than the universe
Yeah.
by the end of the book. And so it's the end of the series. And so it's just, he's just a great character
Yeah.
all around. So
It's great picks, I think, all around
Mm-hmm.
there. The third character is one I don't remember as well, but I feel like that's a good running bit throughout the show. Or the show. Could be the show, could be
Yeah.
the book, could be the radio play, all of the above. Excellent. Do you want to go next, Fred, or you want me to?
Sure, I can go next.
All right.
I'm gonna share a lot of these, and also I'm struggling because the book and the movie were kind of things I came to around the same time,
Mhm.
and I did just watch the movie like today, so it's really rattling around in my head.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still gonna be a lot of similar stuff. I love Marvin. I do love the one-liners. I just love the concept of a depressed robot, like you said, like that should be a thing that's fixable, especially in the world of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Mhm.
And then I'll just pull from the movie again. I love the physical performance of Warwick Davis. Like, I feel even though we love the one-liners, that character could have been like wordless, and you would get a lot of what they're doing,
Mhm.
and that's hard to do. Even though I do love what he says, so I wouldn't want it. I wouldn't want to lose that, part of
Yeah.
it. I would have to also share number 2, so I'm switching around. Zaphod. I like that. To me, this is like just the character that I can take the things he says and does and pull into the real world, whether that makes me happy or sad. It does add a connection to the story. Again, from the movie, I do love the Sam Rockwell performance. And even listening to the audiobook last night, I love the garrulousness of the character. My number 1 is maybe a little bit of a cheat, but I think it kind of what makes it a good book, probably a good radio play, and also a good movie. I'm just going to say Omniscient Narrator as like my favorite character because I think that's what makes the whole thing special. And it does feel like a character. Like you could see it at the end, a book closing, and it's some guy, probably Stephen Fry, just like,
So
and
guide,
this is my
right?
story.
That's
Yeah.
what you would say.
Yeah, the guy.
Yeah, the guide.
Guide.
The guide,
Yeah.
the titular guide.
It's a good pick.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fun pick though too. I would definitely have to share. I mean, I'm not going to add too much more. Marvin, it's definitely he's number 1 with a bullet. He's so funny. Doesn't he become like a parking attendant at the restaurant the universe?
Yep.
Because he's been there for so long.
Yep.
Yeah, that's just great. I do like Ford though too. I don't know why he always kind of kept me in the sequel books. I was just like, because he just always seemed to have like a sense of direction, even when he's just like, okay, we're gonna keep moving. And I'm just like, I don't know, I need somebody like that in my life, a driving force. And he's just a very like reliable character in that regard. Of just like you can always sort of rely on him to at least keep taking steps forward while Arthur is just trying to rattle his brain. Like, but yeah, then it's Zaphod. Like it's I think Fred called it out too. It's like he's the world leader you never want, but God, the fact that he's not our leader and you just get to watch him go through his shenanigans and do his bullshit and steal ships and everything, it's like it's great. And yeah, casting Sam Rockwell is inspired. Like he can do something so crazy. The effects probably didn't do him justice as you guys were talking about, but again, I haven't seen that in a long time, but I do remember him being one of the highlights of that movie. So yeah, and plus just Zaphod's a lot of fun to read and be like, what is this guy? Why is he so important to the universe? But it's just how like seems like losers fail up in reality too. So I don't know. Very fun. And I think that gets us to the end of the episode here, you guys. I don't know if we talked about everything that there is, but you know what? We didn't panic. Which we were not supposed to. I mean, I think if there's one thing we could leave people with is like people should explore this. I imagine this is a topic not everybody knows intimately, and I think you've done a good job of selling it. And just like there's a lot of fun to be had, and any medium you want to explore.
I would say just start with the books, right? The first book especially is not very long. It's very easy to pick up and read in like a day or two even.
Yeah.
If you can find them though, then the radio programs are great. If you're driving, throw them in. It's a great way to pass your drive for sure. But either one. Start with the book.
Yeah.
And then go to the radio programs.
We've got a long road trip this summer, and I might be trying to convince my wife now into being like, we could listen to these radio plays. So. I think it'd be a good pick to keep us going. But thanks so much, Aaron, for being on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Before we let you go, is there anything you would like to plug?
Oh my gosh. Not anything specific. I occasionally show up with Fred as part of the Fractal at the Interchange Theater. I occasionally show up with my friend Connor as a duo called Roommates, where we are roommates on move out day. And of course, I'm a member of Glitter Bomb as well, too, which is the improv party show, which shows up at the Interchange Theater every once in a while, too.
Excellent.
And there's some other stuff cooking, but nothing that I can talk about right now.
Sure.
It's not at a stage to talk about.
That's fair, though. Check Aaron out at the Interchange Theater at theinterchangetheater.com for details. Fred, anything you would like to plug? Any Fractal shows coming up?
6/27, which I know you won't be able to make because you'll be rocking at Summerfest. Who you seeing at Summerfest?
I'm seeing Cake that night.
Oh, yes. Not a bad choice. Not a bad choice.
Go give me a piece.
Oh, well, you better be coming and getting a piece of me.
Talk about it, Fred. What you got?
Yeah, that's June 27th. That's all I have to plug at the moment.
You can make it to Summerfest by 10 o'clock that night. Go catch
Maybe.
No, they're at the BM O'Hara's though at like 7:30.
Oh.
Same time. They're not the big headliners, unfortunately.
What world do we live in where Cake is not a 10 o'clock headliner?
If I have cake at 7:30, I'm going to be asleep by 10.
All I'm going to do is plug the podcast here. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, YouTube. We're on all those social channels. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to rate and review it. 5 stars, please. Join our Patreon for just $1 a month. You can get exclusive content. We have 1 bonus episode per month. Fred, coming up, Taco Bell chicken nuggets.
4th meal? Question mark.
Well, that's another debate. People will find out in that episode. Sign up to learn more. Special thanks to Nick Spitza and Mike Schwantz for our opening and closing theme song. And stay tuned for our next main feed episode.
Boom, 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 boom.
We're going to light that fuse, Fred.
Boom, 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 boom.
We're talking
boom, boom, boom,
Mission Impossible.
boom,
The final reckoning has happened. So now we have to have the final word.
There you go.
Oh, we'll see you then.
Bye.
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 I've got no cares, 'cause all I wanna do is charge my phone, drive, listening to you. And what they told you about will